Well, good morning, folks. It's Thursday, March 10th, and we have Diane Bosfeld with us this morning, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the transition of the organic farmers of Horizon to Organic Valley. And I believe that we're going to get some more updates on that. And we talked yesterday about a bunch of things where we might be able to, might have to, or try to assist the farmers in complying with some of the demands from their new milk supply. And so, Diane, was there some other things that we didn't get to cover yesterday that that we should wrap up on that before we move on to Laura DePietri?
No, so I think the where we're at, we have a meeting with Organic Valley later today. And they've made the statement that they would give us the specifics of exactly who needs to do what. But currently we know there's at least 4 farms that need the bulk tank chart recorder. And we have a quote from our dairy section that those are maximum $2,000 per. So 4 of those, that would be $8,000. We know that we have 2 people that need to put in a bigger bulk tank. And I went back to the dairy section, and their estimate is the tank itself is about $2 per gallon of milk that the tank would hold. So, you know, a 4,000 gallon bulk tank would be a $8,000 cost kind of thing. So that's about, because we don't know exactly what kind of tank how big those, we don't know the specifics yet on who needs those tanks, but we do know that a tank costs $2 per gallon of milk it will hold. So a 10,000 gallon tank would be $20,000. So we don't have any more specifics than that. And then adding on to that bulk tank, 2 farms need a new bulk tank to go to every other day pickup of milk to be able to hold that capacity. We also know they'll have to take a wall out to get the old bulk tank out and put a new one in and then build the wall back. In some cases, sometimes larger bulk tanks have a greater height and they may have to raise the ceiling. So we just, because we haven't got the specifics on exactly who yet, we can't, you know, get any greater detail on the cost of that. But construction, finding somebody to take the wall out, put the wall back in, maybe some farms will do their own, maybe not. We don't have any greater details there. We also know we have 2 farms that need driveways that will accommodate a tractor trailer. So that costs another unknown of specifically who, and then what are we talking about? We talking about taking out trees, gravel, culverts. So that estimating that cost, who knows, 20 to 40,000, just unknown right now. So those are the areas that we know. Oh, and the stanchions. There's 2 farms that need to swap out the headlock stanchions that close around the neck. And to be able to put in something different, a rail with a collar on the animal with a chain to the rail is acceptable. So there's 2 farms that need to switch that out, which depending on the farm, depending on number of stalls, et cetera, just an unknown. So we're looking forward to our conversation with Organic Valley later today, where we'll get the specifics of who, and then we can really start, digging into tightening up these things, working closely with the farm to access the funds that are available, and really starting to get a move on, because as you've mentioned yesterday, some of these things are summer projects, not going to complete them in the winter. So trying to move along on that the best we can.
Yeah, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to refresh my memory, if you would, Diane. All of the farmers have an existing contract that I think runs out in March, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, there's a little bit of time here. It isn't like they're going to have to try to get this done in a week.
Correct. The farms have their Horizon contract through the end of February 2023. So correct, we're not, some items could certainly be done, you know, during the colder months potentially, but certainly some things would be better to get done during the summer months, if you know, summer into early fall if possible. But yes, so we understand. Yeah, construction season would be better, you know, if you're doing the milk house renovation to get a bulk tank in and out, you know, you don't want your water pipes freezing. And so, yeah, there's certain things that would be much better to do in the summertime than cold winter, but some other things potentially could be.
Thanks.
Yeah, and you'll have a better handle. See, some of these complications could be 2 or 3 on the same farm, right?
Yeah, I don't,
So-
yeah. Mhm.
You'll have a better idea after you meet with Organic Valley on if there's 8 farms in total or 10 or 3.
Yes.
So, yeah, that'll be good to get those numbers. Because are you folks gonna try to figure out if you use some of your $20 million toward any of this, and then we would figure out, you know, how to try to get our farmers some balance of that remaining balance. You know, we'll try to figure out how to help with that.
Yeah, so yes, part of that 20 million that will be coming, as I stated yesterday, it's not a competitive process to have the 20 million come to the Dairy Business Innovation Center, but we do have to submit a plan on what we would expend it on. Because there was regional work with a group that put recommendations forward, not going to take us long to write the plan. One of the big recommendations was all this type of infrastructure. The one thing that they were very clear from USDA that they couldn't expend money on, they could buy the bulk tank, but they can't do that construction. They will not grants for construction, building construction of that manner is not going to be covered. So you know, buying the bulk tank, $2 a gallon, they got to spend 20,000 on the bulk tank, and they got to spend another 20,000 to do the construction, tearing out walls, putting them back. That may be an area for that kind of assistance. We think we've got the driveway potentially covered, that type of construction versus, you know, a carpenter. So we're pretty confident that the majority can be covered with the funding from the Dairy Business Innovation Center. The plan would be to support a review of the whole farm. So walking in and doing just one thing, but if there's 5 other things that are really, so if you're going to rip out the stanchions, but you should do water bowls at the same time, then, you know, trying to combine some of these things, because, you know, stanchions and the water for the cows are usually connected. And so if you're pulling out those stanchions, your water bowls are going to be not supported. So now you got to work on the water bowl. So trying to do something more holistic versus just a one-off that leaves something else hanging that the farmer now has to complete. So doing an assessment of that would be a part of it, and then completing a whole project if that's what's needed. So yes, we'll meet those issues that are impacting the access to a market, but there may be some other things that are connected that should be done at the same time.
Yeah. Well, of course, the main thing here, the most important thing that has happened is that, you know, Organic Valley has offered to pick these farms up. So we do have a market. This other stuff, that the corrections items, are small potatoes compared to what it might have been if we didn't have at least the marketplace lined up where this milk could be shipped.
Yeah, I think the farmers still need to review what's being offered, and yes, it's wonderful there is an offer, but they also have to make their own decision. If it doesn't meet what they need, then they may have to, you know, look around a little differently. But there aren't a lot of other options besides the Stonyfield and the Organic Valley if they choose to continue to sell milk organically. I don't think that others, I don't know that they'd ever switch back to conventional because of the price, but now we're at the farmer decision point for sure.
So there are other options for them?
Not many. I mean, the other options that exist, many of, all but 7 kept a relationship with a cooperative, so Agrimark and DFA. So DFA and Agrimark communicated with each one of these farms, and they will take them back if that's what they want, but the price would be the going rate. So it would be, the volatility would be there and it would be lower than what they're being offered potentially organically. The other options are to look at doing their own value added, utilizing their own milk. We haven't had anybody come forward looking for that. Diversifying, selling the cows, doing the milking cows and doing something else. We haven't heard anybody that interested in that. So this is what, from conversations with the farmers, this is what they were looking for, was someone to come pick up their milk and take care of it as they've had it taken care of in the past.
Now, has Organic Valley asked for anything on their part to beef up their manufacturing or their handling of the milk?
No, they were involved and worked with us on the set of recommendations that went into USDA. So that was helpful. Stonyfield was at the table as well. So both of the larger organic buyers took part in the conversation and the recommendations that went to USDA. Their big concern right now is hauling. Their hauler that they pay to pick up the farmer's milk increased their cost. I think it was about 25%. So they're having a really hard time with hauling, but everybody in the state is. Do they have drivers? Do they, how do they keep the companies going that, are picking up this milk? So it's a tough one. So that is their concern area. We have a recommendation in that program with USDA on, driver training, looking at, there was a question out of Maine around the insurance costs that milk haulers have to, the policies they have to keep and the cost of that. So we'll dig into all of that and put a program together for milk hauling as well with this USDA funding. But, that was their main concern area, was the hauling of the milk.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, do you folks at Ag have, say, a Vermont map and then have little pins that you put in where each organic dairy farmer is, so we could look at a map and say, well, there's 25 right here in this small area, and then there's another 25 that are scattered around the perimeter. So is there anything like that available? Or
We could map all of our dairy farms in Vermont, but the agency doesn't keep them separate as organic versus conventional. It doesn't matter to our milk inspectors who collect that data whether they're one or the other. So we don't keep it in that manner and we also don't keep it, if they kept that relationship with Agrimark, but they're shipping organically, we have them listed as Agrimark, not as organic. So we may be able to pick out some of them, but the others who kept their relationship with DFA and Agrimark, we consider them part of that cooperative and don't separate it out that they're organic as well. So yes, we can map all the farms, but it won't be complete of who's organic and versus conventional. But yeah, the Stonyfield and Organic Valley, you bet, they've already done all that of where they got to go with their trucks, et cetera. They've already made those decisions that people are within their existing routes or close enough that they're not worried about their locations.
Yeah, so that part then's been taken care of, really.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and that would have been one of their choice points of taking on a farm or not, offering this contract. So they've already decided they're within their existing hauling routes.
Yeah. Any other questions on the organic stuff?
No, I trust, Diane, that you guys will help as much as possible to the fullest extent with the form that will be required and the constant, what are you doing, what are you doing, what are you doing kind of thing. It's just, I don't know. I know how frustrating it must be for people. And I also realize whenever somebody gives you money, there's got to be strings attached to it. So everything comes at a cost, and I understand that. But to minimize that, especially in this field where, you know, they're working pretty hard to just stay alive, and they got to stop doing what they're doing to fill out more paperwork. It's just, I can see how frustrating it is.
And is the paperwork and the, what are you doing, what are you doing, what are you doing? That's continual. It's not just for starting
Monthly.
setup time.
Every month, I think.
Separate
So
months
the-
until they-
Yep. So the best management practice, so the big water quality grants, you know, we have a maximum of 200,000. We may go higher on that because we have so much ARPA money coming our way for water quality. Because of the size of those grants, the Guidehouse and has told us that that would be monthly reporting. And so of what is happening with the money you received. So until they finish the project and it's signed off that, you know, the
Right.
manure pit's been installed, it's working and everything's good, then the farmer will have to tell us what's going on each month.
the
So
money's got-
until the project is completed. And
right.
once the project is completed, the agency takes over with the evaluation that it's continuing to work correctly. So, you know, that's part of our water quality inspections. You have this manure pit. Is it working correctly? It's not leaking. It's, you know, whatever the parameters are each year on the largest farms, the medium farms every 3 years, and the small farms every 7 years. But we will have to check in on these to make sure they're working correctly and report back. I think there's a 7-year reporting back on these funds. But we will take on that role instead of the farmer. But in the interim of construction, then they will have to tell us what has happened.
And a different area, have we lost any farms from 1st of January through to now this winter, or has it been pretty stable?
Pretty stable. I haven't seen the numbers come in for March yet. We're in the 10th. They should have them pretty soon here. We do the count at the first of the month. So yeah, it's been fairly stable. Pretty quiet actually. So I think the big question right now is costs. Those who purchase fertilizer, the price is awful, but diesel going up tremendously. And grain costs are going up. So it's going to be a tough year for folks. A lot of folks have made the decision to not purchase any fertilizer. Usually a farmer can make it through 1 year like that, but usually not 2. Maybe some, it depends. A lot of this new technology of manure injection, et cetera, helps to reduce fertilizer purchases anyways. So there may be some benefits there from our continued push on the water quality, and those actions that protect water quality can also reduce costs for the farmer. The big issue will be on the diesel fuel, of course, when you're planting your crops, how many times you have to go around that field. So if you utilize cover crops and, you know, no-till, you go around once. But if you plowed it, you gotta, you know, till it back again, harrow it, plant it, you know, that's a lot more times driving around that field. So folks who have implemented the practices that we keep advocating for of cover crop and no-till, they're going to be at the lower end of those fuel costs because they only have to go around once. So other farms that haven't implemented the water quality fixes, you know, that we've been advocating for, they have to drive around the field more often, and the fuel costs are going to be very difficult.
I know I had one farmer tell me he's been using injection for 3 years.
Yep.
And he said that the agronomist, he has a on-farm, well, not on-farm, but a hired agronomist, told him that he would be, with his new soil test, he'd be able to use half of the fertilizer they'd been using, and how much that injection was going to save him on fertilizer. And he said it was unreal. He had a hard time believing it himself. And so that those practices are, they may cost money to get into, but they also save you money on the tail end once you've reached a certain point.
Well, and the third piece of that is that they also have benefits for climate. No-till, keeping the soil intact, benefits climate. You sequester carbon
Yeah.
instead of releasing, and injecting manure is positive for the release of nitrogen into the atmosphere. So that's and NO2 is another greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide. So, you know, lots of added benefits for these water quality practices. Protect the water, save the farmer money, and now protect the climate. So some really positive aspects of the work that farmers are doing.
I know some of the conservation districts have even purchased some of this equipment and rented out, or I don't know just how they do it, but I think they rent it to farmers so they can use the injection system and
Yep.
all that. So,
Indeed, absolutely. Very helpful.
any other questions for Diane?
No, all set.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, do you have anything for us, anything else for us, Diane, that we should know about, or?
No, I'll get in touch with Linda as soon as we get this program set up a little bit better and give you some, you know, what we find out, questions around how we're going to implement the DMC program, any of those questions around Guidehouse and what the requirements will be for farmers. Once we get some answers there, I'd be glad to come back in and give you an overview of that. But I'll let Linda know when we're ready for that. I don't, it probably won't be next week, but we'll push and try to get answers back as soon as we can of here's what we plan on doing. Tell us what hoops we got to jump through to meet the Treasury requirements. So I'll get back in touch with Linda when we got that firmed up and we'll let you know how that sorts out.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't see any hands up or anything, so thanks a lot, Diane, and we appreciate all the hard work you guys do, and we'll try to keep our farmers farming.
Indeed. All right. Thank you very much, Senator Starr. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Dan.
See you later.
Okay, I was wondering, did you guys get the Michael's email, the response to the federal slaughter,
Yep.
on-farm slaughter rules? I thought it was very interesting. They don't even follow their own rules in their response to us. But Michael isn't coming this morning. Michael's up to his ears in some other committee. I think you guys probably know where that is. So he can't, he isn't going to be with us this morning, but we've got NOPA and rural Vermont coming in, I believe it's next week. And I asked Linda to send them a copy of this response to try to get a response from them. But I thought it was terrible, that response. And, you know, if a lot of farms offer milk and rent and meat, eggs to their farm help. And if you read that closely, on-farm slaughter doesn't even pertain to a hired hand that lives in a different house than the farm owner. That only the farm owner's house and those people in that house can eat this, have this on-farm slaughter. So the farmer could slaughter his own beef and use it at his house, but if he was gonna offer meat to the hired hand, he's gotta go to the store and get it. I mean, doesn't that make a lot of sense?
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, and what bothers me is when policy doesn't reflect what's actually happening. Reality is powerful, and we shouldn't make outlaws of traditional practice. I feel like our ability to push back on the feds is very limited, but I wonder if we would ever consider having Tom Barry or somebody from Leahy's staff. And I mean, if I recall, he sits on the ag committee. He's obviously, more than a little bit influential, and just at least ask them what they're doing. Because I'm always haunted by the idea that we could change things, but nobody's kind of asking other than a letter we send. You know what I mean? I don't know if you'd think about that, Mr. Chair, but.
Well, do you know where this letter came from?
Well, it came from them. Well, it came from USDA, sent to them, I guess, to the delegation, and then kind of copying us.
It went to Bernie's office, and Will Stevens, who works for Bernie now.
The Will
Remember
Stevens?
Will from the house?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
He took Jenny Nelson's place
Ah,
on Bernie's staff, and so Will sent this over to Michael, and so we didn't even get a response back directly from the feds. It was kind of second-handed, and
well, I guess what I mean is, could we make sure we're doing what our little bit to keep some pressure on federal staffers to be pushing? I mean, maybe it's hopeless, but I don't know what better to do. I'm open to whatever ideas. That was just top of mind.
well,
I appreciate that, Chris. I'm reading it again. And I mean, it looks like it's pretty well locked down here. It says if a state were to apply the personal use exemption in a manner that did not align with these regulations, it may call into question the at least equal to status. In other words, there's sort of a veiled, I don't want to say threat, but you better mind your P's and Q's here. And one of the things I noticed, I didn't see this before. The personal use exemption requires all owners be present at and participate in the exempted slaughter, and each owner can only handle, transport, and receive his or her own specific portion of the resulting product. To me, that tightens it way further down than what I thought was being allowed already. So,
and it doesn't track, according to Michael, it doesn't track the federal law.
yeah.
It's there. 2/3 of this is somebody's interpretation. And
That's what I mean. And I don't know who, but it's not us that can say to that person's interpretation and their superior, what are you doing? This is like, I don't know how we make the case. It doesn't feel like we can do it, but it seems like perhaps some of our delegation staff maybe could. But we can't get worse off. We couldn't get worse than where we are right now, right?
I guess not. But if you were an organization and you had 10 small farms or farmers that do on-farm slaughter, and your group of 10, if they sued the federal meat slaughter facilities, this letter they sued them over this letter that they were misinterpreting their own law. I think there would be justification for that. We as a state, I mean, how can we get into it? I don't see where we can get into it because we aren't negatively affected as legislators, but that group that is negatively affected, I don't see why they couldn't jointly, maybe there's somebody at Vermont Law School that would love to take something like this on, but that would be for them to decide, like NOFA or rural Vermont or some farm bureau, some farm group, or all three of them. Because it certainly, as Michael has gone over that law with us time and time again, this letter is a vast misrepresentation of what we've been told.
Yep.
So, yeah, we'll, I think after, maybe tomorrow, Michael can come for a few minutes, but we'll have Michael in soon as he's got some free time to kind of pick through this for us, and especially when next week when we have both rural Vermont and NOFA in, we'll make sure that he's here that day to help us wander through this thing and try to come to some rational or unrational decision to take it on.
I think he said he had some ideas, so.
You did.
So we'll do that. But it's quite a nice letter. I'd be proud of that if I worked. Of course, if I worked for the government, I wouldn't give a hoot anyways. Say, you little suckers up there in Vermont, you're gonna either cow down or get shipped out.
Cow down. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. So we've got Laura DeFitre coming in on her aspects of the 709, and that is online, right, Linda? For
It's
Corey and.
Yeah,
and
it's under today's date.
And our 258 bill, it did get shipped over to Approach yesterday, and we'll probably we'll deal with that. Well, we've got next week too. We can deal with that.
Yeah, as long as you get out of here.
Approach.
Yeah.
So we're good with that. And
We,
I don't know.
Finance advanced the cannabis farming thing yesterday or 2 days ago, so that's moving too.
You guys did that in finance, right? Yeah. Did you get to do Rygate yesterday?
Rygate is such a tortured issue. We talked more about it. Every time I hear about it, I feel more and more it's so murky. But if I had to guess, we will limp something along later today.
Because that's really important to the rural part of the eastern side of our state and in the.
Yeah, no, we understand the benefits are very clear. ACCD sent that in. It's also $1 million subsidy every year by Vermont ratepayers, and it's less than questionable air quality is very damning, actually. If we're looking at from only air quality, there's a reason all of those wood plants are getting shut down. So
Well, we
it's,
want to go green, don't we?
well, going green means not polluting, not using old technology that pollutes extra and costs ratepayers an extra million. No joke. It's $1 million subsidy every year by every person buying electricity in Vermont. And
You
I think
mean
that's,
divided amongst every person. Divided amongst every person, not for every person.
yeah, your electric bill is not over $1 million, Bobby, but it's, I think there's, people complain about the deal for solar, and that has been severely curbed as a result of that. And, it's the same issue here. And basically our utilities don't want this. I mean, it's complicated. It is complicated. I feel very torn about it, but I'm happy to debate you as much as you want.
Well, we could buy more power from Canada, but we're dislocating the Indians. We could have, which is cheap. Quebec power. We fumbled that ball so many times on buying power from Hydro-Quebec. And
Let me just stop you, Bobby, because I'm really not in the mood. I'm probably one of the most supportive people in the committee. So I'm just not in the mood to debate you on this. You've looking at probably your cleanest, most straightforward friend on that committee, because I care about the forest industry, but it is not straightforward. In New Hampshire, in Maine, they have shut these down. We've subsidized this plant every step of the way and are constantly asked to do it again and again and again. And anyway, if you ask the plant lobbyists who their friend is in that committee, they'll tell you it's me. So
I asked them. They
Yeah.
said you were good. They said.
okay, then I'll accept your thank you card. Jesus.
Well, I would tell you if they didn't tell me that. So anyways, well, that'd be good if you guys can move that forward for the timber industry, and maybe there'll be some other business come along to use some of that extra heat that they generate and make it so that it's more profitable or better for the ratepayers. So anyways, Linda, what time was Laura gonna be on?
9:45. I just emailed and said you're ready for her now.
Yeah. Well, what about one other issue? Would you have any interest some morning going over to the plant in the new lab and touring that in Randolph? We'd probably leave here around 9 or quarter of, and try to be back by 11:30, quarter to 12. They've invited both the house and us down to do a tour of the new lab, and
Sure.
so.
The other thing I've been hearing a little bit about, Bobby, as we think about how to help some of our dairy friends is there's a bunch of apiaries dying, and I don't know, I'm trying to get more details, but that strikes me as something I think we'd like to hear about. I know I would.
From the apiaries people.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll try to dig, if you'd let me, I'll try to dig up some people and send it to Linda.
Yeah, the professor there at the university used to be with us. I mean, they lost a lot of their bees up there this winter with that pickup no, that's a very important part of our industry, the honey business and the bee business and no, it'd be good to have them in and hear from them. Yeah, if you can get, what's his name?
Let me figure out who we want. But there's that guy, used to be a long time ago rep. Bill
But they do
somebody.
have an association,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I'll
Yeah.
poke around and get something over to Linda next week. Okay.
yeah, sure. No, it'd be good, to hear from them.
Stephen Collier is now with us.
Oh, Steve's on?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, thanks, Chris, for looking into that and dealing with it.
I think Laura's now joined us too.
So we have both Laura Petrie and Steve Collier with us. So, morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
The House sent us a bill that I don't know if you guys had seen it or looked it over or not.
A little bit.
Yeah. We had a run through of the bill from them yesterday from the presenters, and I don't believe they really explained to us what they had changed from the way you folks presented it to them. And I guess we were just looking for your opinion and your take on what they passed over to us and whether or not it was, in the same line of thinking as you folks had when you dropped it off for us. Now, I can't tell you what we're gonna do to it, but we'd like to know from where we start, how well the House did with it.
Well,
So I
I
don't
appreciate.
know if Laura wants to go first on her portions of that, or if you want to go first, Stephen.
Thank you, Senator Starr. Laura, do you want to go or you want me to?
I can read your lips, but I'm not doing a very good job, Laura.
I double mute myself. Sorry, in my methods of getting in. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thanks. So Senator Starr, the answer to your question, Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, for the record, we like what the House did. And I don't remember there being any substantial changes. There was one provision that Carrie Jaguar had proposed for an invasive exotic plant committee, which after discussion with the House, that provision was taken out. But I think to my memory, everything else that's in there now is virtually as we discussed with the committee to begin with. So we're very happy with it. We think it makes some good changes. We also don't think anything is really controversial, at least in our opinion. So we're happy to have you try to embrace it as well.
Well, we don't usually just do that.
True enough.
They never explained it. Well, we felt this should be changed to this, or this should have been changed to that. So I didn't really take a and we haven't had Michael in to do a side by side between what you sent us and what the house sent us, so that's why we're asking you in, just, give us a brief overview of how your take is on it.
Sure. So do you want me to start with section 1 and go through it?
Yeah, just shovel through it, and we'll just make notes.
Okay. So section 1 is the change to the accessory on-farm business definition. And the only thing that's proposed is taking out the word principally.
Yeah,
And it's really, in our view, it's to make the language conform to what we believe the legislature was trying to do when it passed this bill. So for accessory on farms, the threshold for selling qualified products is that a majority of your sales have to be produced on the farm. But right now, the language says a majority of sales have to be principally produced on the farm. Principally produced isn't defined in the accessory on farm business statute, but it is defined in Act 250 and the farming definition, and it's defined in Act 250 board rules, and it means a majority. So really what the law says right now is a majority of a majority, which when you take 50% of 50%, you get 25%. So the way that the law technically reads, arguably, is that only 25% of the qualifying products have to be produced on the farm. And I don't know that we personally or our agency would necessarily have a problem with that, but we just didn't think that's what the legislature meant. And one of our roles is to work with municipalities to understand what this language means when they apply it. And we wanted to make sure that we're construing it appropriately. And in our discussions with House Ag, the sense that we got was that they agree that it was supposed to mean a majority of goods were actually produced on the farm, or at least, sorry, majority of the sales came from the farm where the goods are being sold. So we just proposed that change so that it reflects what we thought was the original legislative intent.
so we had a question on that yesterday, I think, when Tom, I think Tom was the reporter on that section. The one issue I had, and I don't know if I'm right or not, I just ramble on. You had a veggie stand, and your neighbor up the road made maple syrup. And you said, well, golly, I've got to be here selling my veggies anyways. I may as well sell some of your maple syrup. Well, maple syrup sells for, $40, $50 a gallon. And a bag of veggies sells for $5 or $10. Could a farm stand get out of sync pretty quick by selling some of the specialty stuff that brings higher dollars, and therefore they wouldn't be producing 50% of their income to the farm on their own veggies, because they're selling that high-end stuff from the neighbor up or down the road. Would that ever be a problem?
Senator Starr, it certainly could be. I mean, that what the law says now is that the farm has to be generating a majority of the income on their own farm. And so absolutely, if you're selling a few carrots, then you're not going to be able to sell very much maple syrup from another producer. You can sell all your maple syrup of your own, obviously, but yeah, they do have to make that judgment. And I think that was just, as I understand, and I wasn't involved in this when the law was passed, is it was trying to draw a balance between, having a real farm and benefiting that real farm by allowing it to sell, very importantly, other farms' products as well, but not allowing, sort of the instance where Ben and Jerry's puts 2 cows out in front and says, we're a farm, we have these 2 cows. So it's, it's always that balance of trying to draw the lines, but you're absolutely right. The way the law is currently worded, but that's what we were trying to correct here, is that arguably the way the law is worded now is you'd only have to generate 25% of your revenue from your own farm. And like I said, I don't know that our agency is necessarily opposed to that. We just want to make sure that we're telling people what the law means or trying to.
Yeah. No? Any other questions for Steve? No. Okay, Stephen, we're going to move on.
Sure. So section 2 is about electronic, really email service. I'm actually kind of excited about this because I think it's long overdue. But currently, and this only applies to when we are formally serving a regulated entity with an enforcement action, is when this really comes into play. But we have a lot of different regulatory programs, and almost all of them say currently that in order to serve them, which means they're getting notice, which obviously is very important that anybody has notice of whatever we believe may be wrong, that we have to serve them by certified mail or in person. And certified mail is a pretty cumbersome process. It's expensive. It takes time, and it's not how people communicate very much anymore. So, and a lot of people that we serve don't like it. Like, so some of the bigger companies, like retail stores, they're even maybe headquartered out of state. They have stores in Vermont. So we're serving them by certified mail, which they don't want certified mail. They want to be able to communicate electronically because it's more efficient. So what this does, if what we want it to do, is to allow us to serve people by email, as long as we can prove they were actually served. We don't want to send an email and say we're done. We have to know they're served, because it's not fair if they're not. But if we can either prove that they actually received it, or if they agree to accept service, which we think most people will, then we can serve them by email. They can respond by email. We can share documents by email. It's just much quicker. If we can't prove they were served, then we would still have to use either certified mail or personal service. So this is not in any way an effort to try to hold people to account when they haven't been served. It's just to try to make it a more efficient way of serving people who we actually do serve and can prove are served. So does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah. Any idea on how you're going to get them to respond that they received it? Is there any electronic way of doing that, or?
Well, Senator, there are electronic read receipts where you can send to people your message and ask that it create an electronic read receipt when they open it. But we actually put in our language that we don't want to rely just on that. I actually put that in there because I don't think it's fair, because sometimes people share email accounts. So if we send an email to somebody who maybe shares their email with their kids, and their kids open up that email and then we get an electronic read receipt and we think they were served, but they never were, I don't want to create that situation. We want to make sure that people actually have it in order to use email. So what we will do is, when we send it, we will ask them to acknowledge that they received it. So, people who are willing to cooperate will say, yes, I received this. People who are not willing to cooperate, we won't have proof that they received it unless they, respond with, screw you, which sometimes happens. and then we'll still know that they got it. but we'll need them to respond in some way to prove it. Arguably, if they called us and told us they received it, that would also be proof that would be acceptable. But 99% of the time for this to work, it's going to be somebody opening it up and say, yes, I received it.
Yeah. Any question? If the committee has questions, just ask it.
No, and I'm following along with Attorney Merrick's kind of explanation, because when we went through it the first time, Steve, we did raise some questions, but he was very good at getting back to us and outlining what he saw as potential answers to our questions. So I'm fine so far.
Great. And he helpfully, he called me too, and we talked about those questions, and he was great about it. So I appreciate that. So the next section, section 3, it's confusing to read because it's broad, but it's really what it's trying to do is very simple. And it doesn't apply this doesn't apply very often, but we have some situations where where a regulated entity does not currently have a license or a permit that they're required to have, but they're also violating the rules that apply to them. So say somebody transports animals in and out of state, but doesn't meet the import requirements, doesn't have the animals test to make sure that they're disease free, but they're already doing these things. And so maybe we've started enforcement actions against them, and then they apply for a permit. And that's great that they're applying for a permit. That's what we want. But our permit process may be very formulaic. It may just be, do A, B, C, D, and E and submit the registration fee, and we'll give you a permit. And so there have been some situations where there's ongoing enforcement concerns, and then there's an open permit process. And the way that the language is currently worded, we might be issuing somebody a permit only to immediately take some enforcement action on it. And we think that's poor practice and confusing. We want to be clear and upright with everybody that we're regulating. So rather than say to somebody, oh, here's your permit, now by the way, we're going to take some action against it, we'd like to just consolidate those processes. So if there's an enforcement concern and there's a new permit, we just want to bring those together so that we're talking about them at the same time. So we can say, okay, here's your permit, but you've got to deal with these past issues that you haven't dealt with, or, we can't give you a permit until you have done, A, B, and C, whatever the case may be. We just don't want these two separate parallel processes when they should be considered together. And arguably, we could already do that, but it's just cleaner to have the language expressed that is a possibility and that we can do it that way, so that it just makes more sense to have the law clear whenever it can be. So that is all this language is trying to address. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, and people don't like it when you issue them a permit or registration and then immediately thereafter tell them there's a problem with it. It's much better to just lump it together in our view.
Yeah, that should keep people in compliance maybe a little better and faster, and not let it linger too, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, also.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Next, the next section, section 4. So this is all about conforming our state produce inspection laws with the federal FSMA law and the produce safety rule. So these changes are, I think they're all quite minor, but they're also just clarifying that our agency can do what's required under the federal law in order for us to implement the program. So when FSMA, and I wasn't around when this happened either, but this kind of, it developed over time, and FSMA came out before the final rule was enacted. And so this is just an attempt to update the current state statutory language to make sure that it conforms with the federal law and the rule as it's developed. So to me, it doesn't change anything. It just makes it clear that we can do what we're required to do to conform to federal law. I don't know if there's any specific questions about any of the language that you have.
I don't think so. I think that one was pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Okay,
We've always followed the federal rules or changed ours to meet up and match theirs anyhow, so. Yeah.
okay,
Well,
great.
we Proceed.
Okay, so section 7 is, this is about so communities can form mosquito control districts if they want. Carrie is the expert on this, but I believe there are 2 currently in the state. We have a program where we will provide 75% of the funding for larvicide. So larvicide, obviously, when you're killing the mosquitoes before they've hatched. And so we have that program. It's our preferred method when possible to use larval control methods rather than spraying, which is adulticide methods. We prefer larval activities generally, although both are permissible, both are allowed. But this would just be, right now, we will provide 75% of the funding, and we allow the mosquito control districts to provide a 25% match. And they can do that through in-kind adulticide activities. So we can go in, provide the larval funding, and then they can meet their match with adulticide. We would just rather incentivize them to also use larval methods. Doesn't require them to. They can do their own adulticide separately. But in order to meet this match, we would just prefer that they're meeting the match through larvicide instead of adulticide. Carrie, I heard Carrie testify in House Agriculture and Forestry about this, and he also explained that there's one mosquito district, and it's around, I don't remember the name of it, but it's around Lake Dunmore.
Yep.
And it's the only district that currently would be impacted by this, but it actually will not be practically impacted because it already spends enough money on larval activities to be able to meet its match through larval activities. So my understanding is this doesn't have any impact, any practical impact on a current district, but it does make the law incentivize using larval methods instead of adulticide methods. So that's about the extent of my knowledge, unfortunately, on this one, but I can find out more from Carrie if you're interested.
I think my plan is to have Representative Shaw, who is from that area, come in and testify. I did look at the, what do we call it, the YouTube portion of his testimony to the House. And I'm not sure he would agree that it's a practicable non-effect to his district. So I just want to cross my T's and dot my I's with it, that's all.
Certainly, certainly.
No other questions? Yeah, we proceed ahead.
Okay, so section 8 has a series of housekeeping changes on hemp. A lot of it is just taking out the word industrial from hemp. That's a vestige of the 2014 Farm Bill, and industrial is no longer used. And so it's just sort of confusing to have that word in there because it may make people think that they're looking at something other than just hemp, which is what the definition is now. I'm just scanning through the changes. There is one change to clarify what process means. It's not substantive. It's just making it clear that that includes products from hemp concentrate. It's not a change at all in practice, but just clarifying what process means. The one issue that I do think is of some import in this change is in section 564. And so currently, the way that I read the law is that the state of Vermont is required to have a state hemp program, which we're happy to have. The proposal is that we change that, instead of we are required to have one, that we may have one. And the reason for that is that there's several, but currently our state hemp program, and this just started in this year, January 1st, 2022, we now are under the 2018 Farm Bill, and we're now under the tougher restrictions for regulating THC. Our plan is now approved by USDA, and the only way that a state hemp program can exist is if it conforms to federal requirements. So under current law, farmers can either register directly with USDA, or if the state has a program, they can register with the state. But the state has to have the standards that are at least as high as the federal government. So there's really no difference now in whether you register with the state or with the federal government. So a broader issue is that there's some impetus to potentially move hemp under the Cannabis Control Board, because since it's now under Vermont state law legal to grow cannabis, there's an argument at least that there's no reason to differentiate hemp and cannabis in Vermont. There's a tremendous reason to differentiate it if somebody wants to sell hemp that's federally legal, because if it's going to be federally legal, it has to meet the stricter standards or you couldn't sell it in interstate commerce. And there's also obviously other concerns with federal law about growing hemp altogether. But what we're trying to do here is one concern we have is that we're going to have to destroy a lot of hemp crops with the new THC threshold. There's been some estimates that we may have to destroy up to 40% of hemp crops because they won't be able to meet the new threshold. If we don't really want to be in the situation where we are regulating a crop where we have to destroy it all. So if it becomes impractical, or if it's a program that just we don't believe is particularly viable, we might rather defer to the feds to run that for farmers who want to grow federally legal hemp. So that's the ask, is that we not necessarily be required to have it. There would have to be a lot of discussions with the administration, and I believe with your committee as well, before we actually changed and stopped having a hemp program. But we would like the opportunity to not be required to have it if it makes more sense for either the Cannabis Control Board to be running the hemp program that doesn't meet the federal definition, and then the people who do want to meet the federal definition could register with USDA. So there's no immediate changes there, but that would give us flexibility to adjust if we felt it appropriate.
Did you folks have meetings with any of the hemp producers in regards to this change, or thought of changing, or just in-house staff?
Well, in terms of this particular request, we talked internally and with the administration. Stephanie Smith, who heads our hemp program, is in regular contact with the hemp producers. She produces a hemp blog. We definitely have communicated about the changes in this year a lot, and about the risks with the changes this year. I don't know that we've asked whether the shall or the may, but I think my sense is that before we made a change where the state was no longer having a program, we'd be having more outreach with, and Carrie knows more about this than I do, that most hemp growers would probably rather, because in Vermont, most people grow for the floral material and not for the biomass, not for the stalks. When they grow for the floral material, they're in CBD as an example, they're basically doing all the same things that you do for marijuana. It's the same plant, it's the same processing equipment. You do basically everything the same, except that for hemp, it has to be under the 0.3 total THC threshold, whereas for marijuana under state law, it doesn't. So it's our sense that most people would rather not have to meet that 0.3% THC threshold, and that most people will probably want to grow both marijuana and, quote unquote, hemp. So there's some efficiencies perhaps to be gained by not having that federal threshold apply, given the change in state law. But we also would never want to cut off any farmer who wants to grow hemp that's a legal crop to be sold throughout the country. Because there is a big difference between being able to ship CBD products all around the country and being restricted to a Vermont market. So we're trying to figure out how to draw that line, and obviously we're going to need the legislature is going to have to decide how to draw those lines. But this is just an attempt to allow flexibility where warranted.
So I just want to understand, if I could, Steve, Vermont would not have to have its own hemp program.
Correct.
If we don't, it defaults to the federal one.
Correct.
If we do, it can't be any less strict than the federal one.
Absolutely right. We have the
Okay.
choice under federal law about whether to have a state program. And
Yep.
if we don't have one, then farmers can register directly with the USDA. And the standards are all the same, because the federal standards for a state program are the same as they are for a federal program.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, we'll move. Anything else? Anthony, nothing? So we'll move on to the next section.
Okay.
Believe that water quality.
Yeah.
Like, did you want to pick that up, Laura, or you want to let Steve handle
Let's call in the master, Laura.
it? Morning, Laura.
Good morning, everyone. Laura DePietro, Agency of Agriculture, Water Quality Division Director. So this is pretty simple stuff, so hopefully we can get through it with no problem. The first section here is section 9. And this section, it has just one small change. So when farms come to the Agency of Ag to be a medium farm, and I listened to some of the testimony the other day when Gordon was explaining it to you, and you're absolutely right. So we've had 2 permit cycles, right? They're 5-year permits. So medium farms come in, they get permitted. And then they come in again, when we have a new 5-year term and they sign up again. This language is from back when it first got started, that first permit. And the idea was that we were just bringing in medium farms, and we wanted to make sure we got out and inspected them all in the beginning. So within the first 180 days, or 18 months, sorry, not 180 days, 18 months, we were charged to go out and check out all these farms. So it's a 5-year permit. We're required to inspect these farms every 3 years. But in the very beginning, we were required to get out to all of them within 18 months. And so we're past that, right? We've had a decade of regulating these folks. You're absolutely right. The other day in testimony, you said you thought you were losing medium farms. It is one of the categories we're losing the most of. I think like over some of the, it depends on when you look at the time period, but like in the last decade, like 30% of them have been lost. So it is a category that's shrinking. But like just the other day, we got a new one. We got a new poultry operation that's a medium farm. So they do come in as a new farm every once in a while. And our goal is that when there's a new one, we will get out and do that. But if you've already been permitted and you go into the next new permit, right? Because every 5 years we have to make a new permit, that we're not going to, that's not what the intent is. That stays on the 3-year cycle and we just operate like we normally operate with them. But if you're new, we would like to get out there and normally we don't wait 18 months. Obviously, we go out and do a visit relatively quickly. So we were just clarifying this concept of the old language and how this got started and making sure it was really clear that the next 5-year cycle we are not going to go in the first 18 months to all the farms because we're on a 3-year reporting or inspection cycle right now.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And we work with A&R and they're in agreement with that, and we share information back and forth when we get these new ones. So, okay, and so
Yeah, go ahead.
the next section is section 10, which is small farm certification.
Yeah.
And this one it's a relatively simple change, right? So a lot of these smaller farms, when they go out of business and they move on their merry way, their first thought is not, let me make sure I tell the Agency of Agriculture I'm no longer a farm. So the idea of us trying to track these folks down and find out, and get paperwork from them to say that they're out of business, it's just sort of an unrealistic task for us. And so, what we usually do is, we'll send out notices every year to everyone to say you have to fill out your annual certification. And then we get a call back or a letter back saying, no thanks, or we get nothing. And so we'll follow up with those. And if a new farm has come in, we work with that new farm and address that. But this idea of chasing folks, sometimes they move out of state, you have no idea what goes on. So it's not the most important part of our work. The most important part of our work is going out and inspecting these farms. And so taking this administrative responsibility that's been given to us and alleviate it so that we can just focus on doing the actual work of going out there and doing the farm water quality inspections.
So, small farm certification, is that 50 and up?
Yeah, there's a lot of
Size?
different definitions of it, but yes, when you talk about dairy,
So,
yep, 50 mature cows.
so what about the guys that like milk 45 cows? They're under the 50, so they don't get certified.
Nope, they don't get certified if it's, they may have other things going on in their operation. So, a lot of cropland acreage, say they're a grain farmer, and they own 200 acres of grain farming, they would be certified because of that. And so it all depends. But if it's just a 45 head farm for dairy, they would be considered a small farm, which is below a certified small farm. And those are the ones that, as we get complaints, we go out and investigate, but they're not on a regular inspection cycle.
Yeah.
So the only thing that section 10 does, Laura, is to say if it was a small farm and it isn't anymore, they don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay. I just like putting things in simple terms.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, it's just these farms, they're all in the hills, and, a lot of them have other, they're not just a farm, they have other business or other things going on with their operation. So,
Yeah.
okay. Section 11 is addressing, as Gordon outlined, the chicken and compost issue. So the discussions and how the operation fell in the end was that, small farms and certified small farms would fall under this. The number of chickens that you would need, I think it's over 1,000, I have to look it up, to be a certified small farm is pretty significantly, actually it's even more than that. A certified small farm, you're talking about laying hens without a liquid system, so this would be the compost group, it's 6,250 hens.
Oh, wow.
So I think the idea was not meant to be at that high of a level, but it was meant to also include those below that. So this says that small farm for the purposes of chicken and compost means small farms and certified small farms.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any questions on that section?
Nope.
So our small backcountry farms could still do composting without much trouble, right?
They will still be regulated by us, if that's what you mean. I don't know if you think we're more trouble, but.
Yeah, any other questions for Laura?
No, just a matter of personal privilege, if I could. I understand from working on the ice with one of your employees, Caitlin Hayes, that she might be moving on, and I just wanted you to know she's an excellent representation of the agency, and I wish her only the best. She's also one of the top officials in ice hockey in the state.
Yeah, she's tried to get me to play on the ice a few times, and I'm from Florida originally, so I haven't taken her offer because I know I'll just get smoked. But she'll be going on to the Natural Resource Board, so perhaps in another venue you'll get to work with her.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else from committees? Members? No? Anything else from either of you two? No? Well, I guess we're all on the same page or something. But thanks a lot for running through this proposal, and we'll stay in touch as we move through it as a committee. So thanks again.
Thank you all so much for considering these issues and for inviting us in. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So the house didn't really change a whole lot. That I didn't think they did, because they didn't say anything about altering this for that, and yeah. So,
Carrie is scheduled to come in at 10:30.
oh, he is coming?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Steve covered his
You said there were a couple questions you might want to ask Carrie.
on the mosquito.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a pretty big issue down your way.
yeah. It's the only district that will be affected by this change. And again, I'd like to hear from Butch Shaw to see, because he explained it very well, I thought, in the House. And I don't know, we'll see whether we can hear from him. We're not gonna vote this out, obviously, today anyway, right?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
we're gonna hang on to this,
Okay,
because we, may want to use
yeah.
some of those other items,
Yeah.
to add to it.
Yep.
So,
so maybe when we take it up again, you could invite Representative Shaw to come in and just let us know what his issue is with that one section about the mosquito district.
see, it's all about, adultericizing and larvicide.
They spray in Brandon. They spray all over the place to kill the mosquitoes. And the Conservation Law Foundation and somebody else who was doing that part, John O'Brien, when he testified yesterday, there's another group that filed suit. They didn't want him to spray, and they lost in court. And so this was an attempt to head it off at the pass, if you will. In other words, we're not going to give you any more money to spray. I think that's the issue. So I just want to hear from Butch to make sure that we're not,
Well, why don't we ask Carrie where that came from?
we could do that.
I mean,
Yeah,
you guys cowing down, or- yeah. Yeah, and we can have Chris ask him, he's on TV, so he can't even, on Zoom, so he can't even get at him. They can come across the street and get us. No,
10:30, well, that's pretty cool.
yeah, he should be. And once that's over, it's over, I guess.
So Chris, you can't do the floor today, can you? Can you do the floor remotely?
I'm kind of irritated, but because in fact, this morning again tested negative. So I'm not eligible. I feel rotten. I have symptoms that would be linked to COVID, but I don't have COVID. So I have to come in. So I'm going to drive down and be ready for floor because I'm reporting a bill. And then I will drive home and do the rest of my afternoon committee from home. I'm feeling, I still sound crappy, but I am feeling a bit better. Last night was rugged, but then I got a good amount of sleep. So.
Are you sure you looked at those test results really close?
Well, pretending to have COVID seems like a bridge too far. I was wondering, the rules allow us to be remote if we refuse to comply with the mask rule, but
That's
I
right.
don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Walk in the building without one and they'll escort you right out and you don't have to worry.
But then he'd have to drive back home to get.
Yeah,
back
right.
on.
Right. That doesn't get me much.
Well, we've had people do it from their car a lot lately. Witnesses. We had one of the sheriffs yesterday, remember? Government operations. He just parked his sheriff's car and he did the whole thing on his phone.
For a while, for a pretty long time, he was there. At one point, he dropped his phone onto the floor of the car. It looked like he had an accident, although he wasn't
But he
driving.
wasn't driving.
Yeah. Well, I
But I
had,
thought the rules were different for votes on the floor.
I thought they were too. I thought you had to be here.
You have to be there unless you have COVID or you refuse to comply. So the gray area is that, I mean, my wife had COVID. She got a negative rapid test the same day she got a positive PCR test. So there are these timing windows, and I'm confident I don't have COVID because it's the same cold my wife had a week ago. But there's these timing issues, and you all don't want me coming there, and if I maybe have COVID, but I'm still not testing positive, right? That's the.
I don't care. I've already had it.
yeah, you just
It
stay
wouldn't bother
over,
me.
you stay over on your Anthony and Brian's side of the chamber.
I don't know, Bobby. You've been really hurting me on a few of my other bills, so I'm gonna come cough right on you, buddy.
Yeah, well,
I'll be okay. I am feeling much better today, even though I don't sound much better, and so.
Sound fine.
Oh, last night when we visited, you sounded pretty rough.
Last night I just had this wicked pressure all on my head, and anyway, it's no fun. But I went to bed real early. I went to bed when my kids went to bed.
Yeah, it was certainly a nice day.
Can I
So,
run down the hall and see a man about a horse?
yeah,
And I won't, I mean, it'll be 2 minutes.
oh, no, that's fine. We're just waiting for
Gary.
Carrie to talk about that, and we'll hold him up, and let him sit around, wait for us. You guys were late starting yesterday, weren't you, in finance? Or you were gonna start anyways at 1:30?
We always start consistently at 1:30. It's the only break I get.
See, we start at 1 over, usually in the pros.
You want to take a short break? Take a short break.
Oh, we could.
Because I just emailed her, Carrie might be looking at, so I can.
Oh, well, I guess, Carrie's gonna be a little bit late, so why don't we take 10 minutes off and we'll come back